Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests. And side quests.
Hello, welcome to our very first super duper special Levitating Platters Patron pub night. This is the very first one that we're doing. So, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? I mean, this isn't a normal show, so it's just kind of us. It's basically a mini blank tape reunion, basically, right now.
Woohoo! Yeah. So my name is Anson. I am one of Kurt's old friends from junior high / high school. We did a podcast together called Blank Tape for a couple of years, and it was just us two. So It's really fun for me to be back on a podcast recording with Kurt, my old co-host.
Yeah.
I've been a fan of Sidekicks and SideQuests. I've been a patron for a few weeks now, and really happy to support the project.
Yeah, well, I mean, Blank Tape is the genesis for Sidekicks and SideQuests even existing, because I know we were starting to get near the end of that show, and if people go on YouTube, because that's where the episodes are now at this point, and they listen to the very last episode of, we discussed this in length as far as like my idea of like, okay, well, I want to keep going, and here's this idea I have, and let's see if this works. Bright-eyed, full of wonder and optimism, going into 2020 thinking nothing was gonna happen, and then everything happened.
Yeah, that was I forgot, was it pandemic time when that was all happening? Gosh, it been so long.
Because I locked all the socials by January, and then got my first couple episodes recorded in February, and then it wasn't too long after that, like March time frame, when all the pandemic stuff started.
Oh,
so
man.
Yeah, because I think it was like by late March or early April is when I then started working from home, and then was using Skype and stuff like that to call people and get recordings and all that. And that's when I got my super humongous backlog of recordings, which did end up helping me once my son was born, and had a lot of time to catch up, as it were. I've still got a lot of time to catch up now as far as show notes are concerned and write-ups, but
yeah, the COVID time warp is real. I definitely don't have trouble remembering. I do have trouble remembering all that kind of stuff. As far as time goes.
So as you mentioned, yeah, you're one of my newest Patreon supporters. I know the plan was to have Goblin Katie here as well, but she did message us and let us know that something had come up, so we want to keep her in our thoughts and prayers and hope that everything's okay. We'll have to catch her the next go around we do one of these, or maybe she and I will do one on one. Who knows? However many of these we decide to do as time and scheduling permits. So I don't know. Do you want to take us through? You had generously written up a document because you're very organized in that way. And I don't know. How do you want to start us off? Are we going to go back in old blank tape mode? Because I've got my whiskey old fashioned mix cocktail drink here, since it's patron pub night. So
yeah, I was just telling my partner Divya that we used to do the "What Are You Drinking" segment at the beginning of every show. So
yeah,
I also have my whiskey here. I'll go ahead and turn on my camera so you can see my little office here. This is as they say, the visual medium of radio podcasts.
Yeah.
But I've got a fancy little
got like a
glass.
snifter glass there.
Yeah, I stole it from Divya's parents' house. They had some, and so I borrowed it. But
Nice. I've got this glass that I did when the Alumni Association for the fraternity went over to Acre Distilling over in Fort Worth. It's over there by the old train yard and stuff like that. And it's a really cool distillery. If you've never been, they do like group tastings and stuff like that. So I remember going on a Sunday and we got to taste all these different alcohols. And one of the perks of going was you got a little glass at the end of it. So,
oh, that's cool.
yeah, so cheers. Yeah,
cheers.
woo, 100 episodes. We did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And I've got Balcones as the whiskey base. So it's the brimstone. So it's like the heavier whiskey.
I never knew if it was balcones or balconies. But yeah.
I could go ask Daniel for the proper pronunciation, but I know he's moved on to other distilling opportunities now. So we'll have to keep drinking wherever he goes.
Yeah, so I had some bullet points of ideas. We could talk about some of the favorite moments that have happened in the course of the show.
Yeah.
Some things that we like about the show, ideas for new things to try, and then turn the tables where the guests get to ask questions of you, the host, instead of you asking the questions.
Sure.
And then so I guess top 3 favorite NPCs from the last, from the duration of the show. And when I go through and listen, I like to star the episodes that I think are really good in my podcast app. And so I skimmed through and picked a couple that I remembered and that were starred. The couple that stood out were Taylor, the Immortal Artist. And this one I thought was kind of cool because, and I'll mention this in the next little tidbit here, is I thought it was really fun to hear your editing tricks, like your voice effects, and it surprised me because I wasn't expecting it. But you put on a deep, echoey, scary voice for the the underworld demon god that she serves.
Yeah.
And so I was in my bathroom, cleaning the bathroom or something, and all of a sudden I heard this deep, booming voice. And I was like, "Whoa!" So really took me into
I'm a trained singer. You didn't know that I could just naturally do that?
So that was really fun. I think the episode was a great episode overall too.
Oh yeah, Melly was great, and she does great work at Demiplane, but she got to talk and explain about the Cortex system and just her love and passion and enthusiasm for not only community but tabletop role-playing game in general. She's super awesome, and I love doing that episode. And it was it was a delightful. I mean, I love all my NPCs, or all the NPCs made on the show. They're all my children. I love them all equally. But yeah, no, that was a fun episode to edit and pitch down and put a reverb on it and all that good sort of kind of stuff.
And the other one that I remembered was cool was Jasper the Frog Errant. I think this is the one where your guest was doing some voice acting, or he just inhabited the role really funnily of the tiny little frog who was trying to ask for help on his side quest, and that was a funny scene that just really stuck with me too. Oh
yeah, Alexi Sargent, of Cloven Pine Games. So he's made some awesome stuff, and I got to back the Back Again for the Broken Lands book, which is a Tolkien-esque sort of role-playing game for the quiet moments after you've defeated the Doomslord and y'all are making your way back to the equivalent of the Shire, and so you have to, it's kind of like a story narrating sort of a game. But yeah, no, Alexi was great on that episode. Would love to, I'm going through the catalog of everyone, and so I'm trying to contact everyone slowly but surely to have them on for their second spots back on the show, and then you tonight being the three-peat, so the first one in the three-peat club, the hat trick club. Yeah,
that's a fun achievement. So what about you? Do you have any I know it's hard to pick a favorite kid, but what are some, it doesn't have to be a favorite, but what are some moments that you really remember enjoying or having a fun time with?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was, thinking on the demi-plane side of things, the episodes that I also got to do with Joshua Simons and Travis Frederick, who's the co-founder, CTO of Demi-Plane. Those episodes were awesome, and especially, just the generous nature of those individuals. Fun episodes with Sahara, the werewolf, dragonborn blacksmith, and Binwick, the death tyrant beholder chef. With the interdimensional chef's guild, which is a very fun piece of world building, which I hope people have been able to introduce in their game, which is all sorts of like, oh, you need Gith Yankee cooking? Oh, I know just the recipe card for you, kind of a situation. Those episodes were fun, and just most notably and recently, getting to guest with Nicholas Cardarelli, and having him make Cirrus, the Rakshasa entertainer, as well as the Dispel Magic podcast duo, Benjamin Huffman and Dane Fox McGraw, with making the Delramon and Katniss Hexblood Stonecasters that were also fantasy game designers. It was a very meta episode and very fun. And then getting to talk with Katie DeMatteis and Ben Martin Mooney of the Amateurish Productions was also another fun recent one to get to do. They were very enthusiastic, and I think they said they wanted to adopt the NPC randomization table methodology and perhaps make that into some sort of segment or show offering on their Twitch stream, so that way they can populate their game world with all sorts of community created sort of NPC characters.
Man, way to go! Way to make your mark on the community.
Yeah, slowly
That's
but
cool.
surely. And I've loved talking with all my guests, so it is true that they're all my favorite children. And yeah, I'll go back and listen to old episodes and be like, that was a fun episode, or that was a fun interview to get to do, and hopefully the editing and the pacing and all that is continuing to improve, not as choppy sounding as they once were, just because I was so... This came from our days when I got the helm of editing blank tape episodes. I was like, I'm listening to us going, and breathing and, smacking our lips and all that stuff. That was just irritating to me to listen to in my ears while editing. And so you could definitely tell the difference between Anson's editing and my editing of episodes. And I felt like that carried in to the beginning of Sidekicks and Side Quests. And then I just had to eventually be like, okay, you can let some of it slide. You listen to some major podcasts out there, and there's people breathing and smacking their lips and saying filler words all the time. You can take it a little easy. You don't have to be so precise.
He says that as I'm over here hitting the mute button every time I take a drink, just so I don't get the noise on the recording.
Well, see, I was thinking before we started rolling, I needed to make sure I found some of that Kevin MacLeod royalty-free, like tavern background, McGinty. I don't know. I think I remember the name of the piece was like something McGinty.
McGinty's Jig or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to find like some of that tavern background sort of ambient noise, and then I'll layer that so then it feels like we're at the real life place that inspired the fictional Levitating Platter of Flying Saucer. Because you go in there and there's always music playing and there's people milling about and they're drinking, they're having fun and laughing, and it's like, if you were in a D&D world and you went into a tavern on a Friday or Saturday night, it's probably the same sort of vibe you'd be getting.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the one with the, I think it was Githraki Chef, the Chef's Guild, because I had also starred that one in my list when I was going through, so...
Oh yeah, Benwick. Yeah, I remember he was just like, you mean I could be more than one kind of a beholder? And he was like, a death tyrant. It's an undead beholder. That's pretty cool. I'll go with that one. Like, okay, yeah. Oozy blob was one of the adjectives. It's a pretty good adjective. Ovular oozy blob.
Yeah. Good deal. So, the next thing I had written down to grill Kurt on was what works about the podcast. So,
yeah.
I mentioned this earlier. Yeah, I mentioned this
full
earlier.
criticism mode.
I think it's really fun to hear the editing tricks, like the voice effects was a nice little surprise. I am a little bit behind. I think you noticed that I'm kind of always behind on my podcast and stuff. So the one that I just finished just recently was Moose, the dressmaker. So that's probably a few months behind at this point, but catching up. So maybe there's more voice tricks that I haven't just heard yet, but getting there. So I really enjoy that. I think my favorite thing about it overall is the great variety of people that you get between like the D&D experts, like the D&D newbies, and like some people who are total, strangers to the game. So if it's a stranger to the game, it's fun because you get to like pull them out of their shell and be like, oh, it's like, let's just like be creative. Like this is a free space to just invent whatever you want to, and like it's fun to see people kind of like take those steps.
Yeah,
because I've been there too.
Getting to lead Jonathan Blevins by the hand. He's the famous Twitch streamer Ninja's brother. And he was just like, I would have made fun of people who used to play D&D, and I've got friends that are into it, and they're like, oh, you should try it. And it's like, okay, I'll take a chance on this podcast and see how it goes. And by the end of it, you can hear it in his voice. He was just like, that's D&D? Wow, that's so much fun. I should really try and play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of my experience because you introduced me to D&D also, and getting into that headspace of like being creative and inventive is fun to hear new people take that step. And then you get somebody on who's like a D&D, like, very experienced, very comfortable, like doing voices and just getting into that world. And so it's just like the magic and the chemistry of when you get somebody who's like so ready to go and so excited. It's just fun to have both of those experiences, and you can create some really fun things with both of those experiences. So I like how the show has a consistent format, but the variety of guests you have on just leads it to be like a different experience every time, and it's a lot of fun. So I really enjoy that aspect of it.
So I mean, I know you said you're a little bit behind because you're working remote. You're not having to bust tail on the Houston highways and all that sort of kind of stuff. But for you, when you take an opportunity to listen to a guest who's previously been on and then they come back on the show, from a listener perspective, what's that like as far as the difference in the tone or the energy or stuff like that?
That's tough. I haven't noticed a big difference. I think maybe if they were like nervous the first time or unsure what's going on, they're more excited the second time. But I can't say that I've noticed a big difference.
Okay.
I guess is a good thing. It's a consistent experience.
Okay, good. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
You'd have to remind me too.
I mean, you've been on 2 times before, and then Effler's been on twice. Charles has been on twice. Elise has now been on twice. I know she just had her episode come out at the time of this recording just this past Wednesday. So something forward to look to. Yeah. So, I mean, those are the ones I could call off the top of my dome.
Yeah, I just pulled up my list, and I'm not that far behind. I just finished number 90, and of course we're at 100 here, so I'm only 10 behind. That's really not bad at all.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm happy that I'm catching up. And you're totally right. It's the commute that did it. I don't. This is you see me. I'm in my work chair now. I have an L-shaped desk, and so like the personal is here, and if I just turn to the right, this is the work setup. So my commute takes no time at all, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lovely park or trail or something that you could go walk down and just pop on some headphones or earbuds, Walkman disc things, and go listen and escape to a fantasy world while you're looking at serene park landscapes.
Oh yeah, usually these days it's doing the dishes or driving somewhere, just for fun or whatever,
But as far as the mundane chore threshold acceptance for podcast listening, so mine meets that barrier level as far as like it's a good podcast that you can listen to while you're doing the dishes or flossing your teeth or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I used to want to. I've always been interested in the idea of like a shower speaker, like listen to podcasts in the shower. But the problem there is that like, if your phone is, on the counter or whatever, and like you miss something, you can't rewind because you're like you're stuck. You have to like, I gotta like reach out and like try to follow.
Or you get one of those bags. Like if you go boating out on the lake, you can put like your phone in a bag that's got a membrane enough that I guess you can still manipulate a touch screen and stuff like that. Maybe that's as we would say, a redneck engineering tip.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what I had on my notes for what works.
Anything that doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you like the ad breaks?
Yeah, the ads are cool.
I mean, it typically tends to follow a script, and I don't do it like some of these other podcasts where they maybe come up with a bit and then lead into it because it has to do with like that week's episode. I know that would take more time and effort to do, but it's something that could be done, I suppose. So it's not just the same thing, although like you were saying, consistency is a good thing. So you would at least know when I start talking about that stuff, you're like, okay, two 30-minute skips ahead, two 30-second skips ahead. Okay, I'm basically done with the ad now and I can get back to the good stuff.
Oh, I listen anyway because, like I said, I'm either driving or I have my dish gloves on. So,
so you're forced to.
You used to just use the same recording every time for a while, and so I basically had them memorized. Apply a beer bomb to your face and get the sweet aroma of victory with enhanced strength and dexterity.
Oh yeah, those were the days when I was a new dad and having to desperately catch up on a huge backlog of episodes. And I was like, okay, I just recorded the ad things and then I just drop it in, go, and then keep going. So it was a way to survive.
Yeah. So I think the ads are fine. I think it's great that you have sponsors and stuff. It's cool that they're in the industry too. That the mini maker, Texas Minis.
Reaper. Which I know, spoiler alert, I know that program has ceased, so I am in the market looking for a new sponsor if someone wants to sponsor the random encounter section of the show.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is because Mr. Ed passed away, and so, they're taking their time and getting things all situated, with their new life circumstances. So I mean, there's they still need all your love and support and patronage and all that stuff. It's just I for the time being, I think they've just suspended their affiliate program. So the link technically still works if you wanted to use it on the older episodes, but like moving forward, I won't be adding them to any newer episodes that'll be coming out.
I thought it was really sweet when you read the in memoriam for him right after he passed in the episode. I thought that was really nice. I guess the only criticism that I had that comes to mind if I'm thinking of something is for some of your newer guests, it's a little hard for me to tell because the app that I use, Overcast, I use the smart speed feature where it like skips silences and it kind of like speeds things up a little bit. But I always wonder if your newer guests who are like having trouble getting started, you have a lot of great ideas and you like to share them and be like, okay, like here's 3 possibilities. Like they roll something totally crazy and you're like, all right, could it be this or this? Do you think that people are having trouble like coming up with ideas for themselves? Like, for example, like if a crazy roll of a crazy secret or a crazy lore comes up, do you usually give the guest like a minute to think about it, or do you like usually try to throw out ideas as quickly as you can, or like what's your strategy there? Do you worry about dead time, like dead herring time? You know what I mean? Like,
no, I mean, this is behind the scenes as well. We're recording right now on a program called Zencastr. And that's thanks to my friends at Dispel Magic, Ben and Dane, letting me in on the secret of this program, which is really cool. So before that, again, in the early days, I was using like Skype and recording locally and stuff like that when I still could feasibly do that. And then I switched over to Zoom, and for the longest time, Zoom would let you just record for as long as you want. Even if you only said, oh, it's 40 minutes, they would let you go over, no problem. And then it got to a point where Zoom cut off that like unlimited recording time and they kept you hard at the 40 minutes. And so I would always be having to like, tell a guest like, hey, we'll talk. And if it goes out, we'll just pop back in. And so I think recently I've trained myself because of, the time crunch that I
Yeah,
have.
totally. Yeah.
It's like me just trying to like, I'll still let guests take their time with
Mhm.
providing their own answers, but I'm just trying to be helpful and give out
Mhm.
some ideas because you can probably listen to the episodes where sometimes I'll give out a couple of ideas and then the guest will say something that's even cooler and that they're like, no, I'm inspired by this idea. And then I back off and I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah. So if we're going to work with this idea, well, then what does that mean? And maybe I'll try and ask some probing questions as far as like, well, if this is the circumstance, then, but what does it mean based on some of the other previous stuff we rolled? And then that helps, guests connect the puzzle pieces, the dots and whatnot, to have the character make sense and they have that ownership. So I definitely want people to have their agency on this show, and I don't want to railroad them and say, no, the NPC we're making is only going to have my cool ideas and not my guests. I always try to be very deferential to my guests as much as I can, but I do try to help out where need be. I think when you listen to the Hexblood Stonecaster episode with the Dispel Magic podcasters, there's a joke in there that that Dane says like, what you don't know is that there's really long gaps of silence in it, and because we were at the question of like, what are adjectives that describe your characters, and
Uh-huh.
so there's in the raw audio, it's like there was a long silence of them just trying to think and figure out stuff, and so I kind of condensed it to like give you the feeling of like they're sitting there thinking without you actually having to suffer in silence of like it's been like 10 seconds and no one said anything. I want to keep it
Yeah.
I want to keep the pace moving so people
Okay.
don't get bored or lost.
Yeah. All right, that makes sense. Yeah, I get that it's like a time crunch because of the recording limits and then like the magic of editing too. So yeah, that makes sense. Cool. If
I
you
do try and it is an intense listening editing, as you'll recall from our days of like you're sitting there editing and you're going back and listening to the same snippet like 13 times because you're
yes.
just like I'm not feeling the cadence of this, or like this thing it seems too rushed. So then you're like manipulating, you're like, but I don't like how this, he smacks his lips here, and so but then it's like because that blends in with him starting to answer the question, so you're like
Yeah.
you're
Oh,
trying to be real noodly, and sometimes you just have to throw up your hands and be like, well, I did the best I could, and I just hope that people will be able to fill in the gaps of between the mess.
yeah, totally. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Um, I'm excited that you have another like duo episode coming up. Um, I always enjoy those episodes where it's like there's an extra guest, like there's two other guests, because it's like
Mhm.
extra double trouble.
Yeah.
Those are really fun too. Um, the only thing I can think of to try is um, sometimes because I know the theme song, I've been like rocking out. Like we could have we should like write a cover of the theme song or something like that, like an
Well,
alternate
you're
version or
you're
something.
the one that has the theory degree, and you have Sibelius or something like that. Are
Yeah,
you offering your services pro bono?
I think it would be fun. I think music is a hobby that I've you know um, really been looking forward to like getting back into, and I think I told you this offline in our own friend conversations that I bought myself a little keyboard piano.
Hmm.
I'd really like to take piano lessons again at some point, and arranging music is a fun thing that I've done in the past. So
It would be cool. I know that Patreon is getting rid of the goals thing on their Patreon pages. So
oh,
moving
interesting.
forward, those will disappear. But I know one of the lofty goals was like, if this podcast made some ridiculous amount of money every month for whatever reason, then I would definitely look into like have professionally made music and stuff like that. So it would like redo the theme song, redo the outro song, and all the musical stings in between, maybe even some sort of like, I don't know, just some sort of underlying like ambiance track that I could just put in. So then it doesn't feel like it's just two people talking. Although, those kinds of, audio listening experiences are fine when it's two people talking. But sometimes, if you can break it up a little bit, I know there's a podcast I listen to, The Inn at the Edge of Greenwood, which is a very awesome storytelling podcast within D&D. But the host of that show is inhabiting a character, the innkeeper. And so he does have like ambiance tracks going on in the background, sound effects and stuff like that. I know Kenneth Vigu, who does the Chad Fallout 76 podcast, goes above and beyond with all the Foley sound effects and all that stuff. So you really do get the sense of the old radio play feel whenever you're listening to like frying pans, but like even the crunch of gravel, or they're talking about they're gearing up in a gas powered vehicle and they're going to go tearing down the highway to go rob some sort of Federal Reserve in Washington DC. Like you're hearing like, oh, here's the loud diesel engine and motorbikes firing up and guns and explosions, and even audio snippets like from the actual games themselves make their way into the episodes. So I know Kenny does like a fantastic job with all of his soundscape stuff, and whenever you listen to other major podcasts like Dungeons and Daddies that Beth May is on, they have top-notch audio, maybe cues, maybe not so much cues, because you do want to listen to the actual player characters, the actors, tell their jokes and everyone busts out laughing and all that sort of kind of stuff.
Yeah, that can take a lot of work too, all the sounds for sure.
I know I joked and said pro bono because I know that would be a lot of work, but maybe I could perhaps knock off some of that $4 a month and give some of that $4 a month back to you. So then that way you could, I could financially afford you, because this podcast does run on a pretty shoestring budget for sure.
Yeah, afford my hobby messing around. So I guess that reminds me of something else I was thinking about. Like you mentioned this Zencastr tool, which looks pretty cool. Like I would say don't be afraid to have a higher tier. Like if there's a tool like this, like Zencastr, and it's like X dollars a month, and like you really wish you could use it, like I would support a slightly higher tier. Like don't be afraid to, if there's specific, especially if there's like something that's specific, like, oh, this would improve my life. Zencastr would save me a lot of headache to be able to use their recording tools. Like, I know you like to advertise yourself as the cheapest podcast Patreon, but don't be afraid to ask what you need. Like I think anything that can take a little pain off of you as the creator is worth it. So,
I do try and follow that Saint Therese Lisieux model of the little way, just being very humble and like I'm not trying to take up anyone's space. I'm just happy to be here making a podcast. This is my fun hobby. It's not my livelihood. So I don't want to be obnoxious to people and being like, you have to pay me an exorbitant amount of money to barely get anything of mediocre quality.
Well, the shoutouts are fun. I like that. So, anyways, yeah. I don't think I have.
Luckily, in the more behind the scenes talk, this Zencastr Plus, or basically the free Plus, I guess I'll try filling out the form, because from the representative who emailed me back earlier today informing me that it would not impact my Fireside hosting or website in any way. It just means that if I get approved for it, it means I'll have to run like Zencastr ads or like other brand affiliates that they say, which I guess is no different than like YouTube and Spotify and stuff like that, or Anchor, some of these other services that make it really easy for someone to be able to start up and monetize and stuff like that. But I try not to get too hung up on that sort of kind of stuff, because like I said, it's a hobby, it's not a grind, and I'm not trying to contribute to anyone's financial woes just because, you could, we're here at a fictional pub right now, and we could just be like, have you seen the gas prices? Do you know how much it costs to feed my household? All those sorts of kind of talks. And that's why it's like, hey, $4 a month, like, and you get like the most that I can feasibly put out as far as a Patreon person, and that's less than some of these other Patreons out there, not to disparage them or anything like that, but their minimum thing is $5. Well, my highest tier is $4. That's $1 less than the minimum from some of these other Patreon accounts out there. So I think you get more bang for your limited amount of bucks.
Very nice. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. I just, what you're doing is really cool, and don't be ashamed of the cost that it takes. So I support you. That's all I'm trying to say.
Sure, yeah.
I'm the biggest fan, maybe besides mom and dad. I don't know. They can fight me.
And of course, Goblin Katie, who was the very first Patreon supporter, true. Which hope she's doing okay. We're here in our fictional pub, and we got the text message where we were already planning on meeting up, and she told us, something came up, and we're just like, well, we're already on our way to go drink, so I guess we will. But yeah, we'll don't worry, everyone. We will get her back on, and we will have a grand old time. But yeah, I mean, if you don't know, the Patreon tiers very closely model off the lifestyle expenses that's in 5th edition. So if you go and look in the Dungeon Master's Guide and you look up lifestyle expenses, like it's like, if you want to live like modestly, it's like 1 gold a day, or like, or 2 gold a day, or 4 gold a day. And so like wealthy is considered like 4 gold a day, whereas like aristocratic is like 10 gold a day, which that would be like, okay, people want something from me. I know when Nicholas Cardarelli had me on his podcast, he was asking that same sort of question, like, well, what's something that you've got cooked up for the Patreon? And I'm just like, I honestly don't know, because I've got my dedicated, albeit limited, small, mighty team of patrons who support me, but I don't want to promise them more than I can deliver. But I know ideas of like, maybe if you did like PDF nice formatted sheets of your NPC characters that get made in the write-ups, that might be something cool. Which then at that point, okay, maybe a $10 a month membership would be something like, hey, we can get you, like, when we make PDF copies of NPC sheets, then that means you get those if you're at that level. And I don't know if there's any other sorts of ideas that you think would be worth like enrolling for $10 a month, because $10 a month times 12, that's $120 a year. So what do you think is worth $120 a year? I mean, conceivably, yeah, if we make PDFs of all the characters, then like, yeah, for $120 a year, yeah, whenever we make them, you just get them for, as part of the $10 plus all the other stuff. Plus, I imagine something else, because I mean, I feel like for PDFs, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's maybe something a little more there for $10 a month.
That's really clever about the lifestyle expenses. I never noticed that was a D&D pun, because I don't know it. I don't know 5th edition that, or any edition that well.
You just need to play more D&D, dude.
I know. It's so funny. My brother's been like getting into it. He has a game that he plays.
You're like, hey, I know this podcast. I happen to be a patron of the arts, and this podcast you might really like.
I should tell him about it. I think I'm sure I've told him about it, but I'm going to bug him about it some more again. I'll see him tomorrow.
Okay.
Sunday family dinner, but
sure, yeah. That guy's still doing podcasting? I thought he stopped when you guys stopped doing a podcast, he'll say.
No, I couldn't hold him back. He was full of a podcasting fire.
Yep, he had to chill by the fireside.
Oh. So the next section that we had here was Turn the Tables, where the guests, aka me and Goblin Katie, get to ask questions of the host. I've been trying to brainstorm all week, or all few weeks that we've been talking about this, and what I got so far is, number 1, if you snap your fingers, you can have any member of the D&D community on the show, any one person, who would you have?
That's a good question. I mean, I know a lot of people would probably jump to anyone from the Critical Role company or cast, which I would absolutely love to do. But honestly, I mean, I really like Matt Colville's spirit, and I like his knowledge that he has to impart. I know that he's super busy with running a company and all that stuff, and he probably doesn't do that many podcast interviews. And I'm sure he would be very gracious and say, well, thanks for considering me, but I'm sure there's somebody more important than me who would have more fun on your podcast. But Matt, I think would be totally cool to sit down and have that kind of conversation, since I watch so many of his videos and I've enjoyed so many of his various podcasts and streams and all that, and his products. I mean, every Arcadia. I'm not a Patreon supporter of MCDM Productions, but at this point I ought to be, because then I'd at least save some money on all of the Arcadia issues that the PDFs that they produce on a monthly basis that come out with all these supplemental Dungeons and Dragons content that they produce. So James Intricasso, who's also a lead designer for them, would also be another fun guest to have on the show as well.
Is he part of Critical Role or no?
Who, Matt Colville?
Yeah.
Matt Colville was mentioned whenever Critical Role would do these they would do like these tournament fights between all the characters. The joke is that Matt Mercer would be like, oh, you have a dream and there's this guy, this wizard named Matthew Colville who all summoned you here. Now you have to fight each other. That was a joke early on in some of the first couple ones of those that they did. But he's been associated with them in part because he helped do their first comic book anthology, and so he did do the writing for that comic book. And I know there's a really funny email mishap that happened when Liam O'Brien was coming up with his half-elven character. And, because Liam O'Brien's a voice actor, and at the time, Matt Colville was working at Turtle Rock Studios, which is a video game studio that did, they did Evolve. They were the ones originally pioneering Left 4 Dead before Valve came over and took over that IP and stuff like that. So there was some overlap with games that Liam and Matt got to work on. And of course, Matt Mercer is a voice actor as well. And so Liam sends this email. Well, he sends it to the wrong Matt. And so then Matt Colville responds and kind of chides him a little bit, but it's also fun and tongue-in-cheek and stuff like that, as far as like, this character concept would never work and stuff like that. But then it ends up being okay. And occasionally I you hear that like, oh, they'll all go out and get lunch together and stuff like that. And
nice.
Who knows if they're trading stories or stuff like that. I know that Critical Role, all those cast members and team love Matt Colville and all that he does, as he's been a stalwart of the D&D community online. Just a good guy, just a good dude, and that's why I think he'd be awesome to have on the podcast. If I could make that happen, I'm certainly open to trying. Ask and maybe you shall receive in this circumstance, but who knows? We'll just keep asking anyone to be on the show that would like to be.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. You had I just listened to one where you had, I think it was Moose's episode, where you had somebody who had contacted you about being on the show, and
Matthew J. Really cool. Hansen, who runs Sneak Attack Press. So he must have found me through, the Twitter algorithm or the Twitter shtick is, before the Elon Musk takeover was like everyone on Saturdays would do like self-promo Saturday. And maybe we had, crossed wires in that way. But yeah, it was like not too long before that recording happened that he reached out and said, hey, I have this new product coming out. I would love to come on your podcast and talk about it. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, we can get you out on the show. That's no problem. It would premiere after the product had launched, but I think he was able to work it in the episode to say like, oh, well, now this thing is available now, and you can go to this website and get yourself a copy.
Yeah.
It works. If you do email me, I do in fact work to try and get you on the show. So.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Critical Role, I had the only Critical Role I've ever watched was the one that you recommended to me, which was like the Harry Potter one. There was like
the one shot, yeah.
Yeah, it was just one episode, but that was a lot of fun. It was really funny. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, it's like watch these expert storytellers and people who have a good rapport because they like work together so much. They have a lot of fun, and it's just fun to be part of that experience. So that was cool.
Yeah, they're continuing to be a powerhouse. I mean, I don't know if you've been keeping up with all the Amazon Prime because I was one of the 88,000 backers on the original Kickstarter for the animated show. And then after the success of that record breaking Kickstarter, Amazon came in and then was like, hey, not only are we going to, fund a second and third seasons of the Legend of Vox Machina, but we're going to go ahead and start producing an animated show based on their second campaign, The Mighty
Oh
Nun.
wow.
So Critical Role is doing pretty well right now.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know that at all. That's cool.
Yeah, so I mean that might be something you and Divya might want to, especially if Divya has not been around D&D, be like, hey, there's this animated, it is a cartoon, but it's like definitely for mature adult audiences. But it's an animated telling of, the first campaign. Because the first and second seasons of The Legend of Vox Machina do cover major swaths of episode from the first campaign that they did.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so lots of people are coming into the Critter fandom because they heard the hype online and they checked out the Amazon Prime show, and then they're like, okay, I think I'll try out this D&D thing now, which is cool. I mean, it's the same thing that happens like with Stranger Things, or now we have, at the time of this recording, the D&D Honor Among Thieves movie coming out, which will probably also do a lot to inspire people to want to try who have never tried before.
Yeah. Let's see what I'm breaking the law here, and I'm looking at the internet while we're recording because we were talking about that.
Sure, yeah.
Where's Honor Among Thieves? I was just reading reviews.
It's got
of it.
Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Justice Smith, Hugh Grant.
All right, 89%.
The guy from Bridgerton's in it.
Chris Pine, I like very much. All right, next question. Bringing it back.
Yeah.
If you could have any non-member of the D&D community on the show, who would you have? So anybody who's like a family member or a friend or just a celebrity who's like not into D&D, like who's someone random that you would really like to have?
I mean, now that you got me thinking of like, the psychological thing of like where you're saying, well, exclude these other categories of people, and then it got me thinking of like, what are other D&D people like? Oh, Joe Manganiello, and like, oh, Stephen Colbert, and like some of those big names, which obviously would have no need to appear on my podcast because they're way too busy. But let's see, so someone who is not currently in the hobby that I would like to have as a guest on the show. That is a good question. I mean that's a stumper. I mean, like I said, I'm happy to have anyone on the show. So if there's some famous actor or producer or newspaper person or social media whiz kid,
what about your sister Sean? Is she interested at all?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's the story, of course, where the one Christmas, because I was so excited for 5th edition, I went ahead, for Christmas, I bought her the starter kit along with like some extra dice and stuff like that for Christmas. And I'm pretty sure it sat up in their game closet for the longest time. And then, in their minimalist downsizing sort of kick, I think they may have sold that stuff or given it away or something like that, which,
Sorry, Kurt.
My family loves me. My sister loves me. She does support me in the things I do. I have gotten her to listen to a couple of episodes. It would be fun and interesting if she wanted to guest, but again, that's on her. I'm not going to force her. I've learned that lesson now. Clearly, you cannot force the things you love on people. You just have to be cool and enthusiastic about it, but just leave the invitation open as far as just letting people like take their own speed and their own time with processing stuff.
What about the Mrs. Kernwelge? I don't know if she's nameless or if she's named on the internet.
I mean,
would she be interested?
I don't know if she would be. I mean, she loves D&D. Don't get me wrong, but I think she likes her anonymity for the most part, as far as most things on the internet are concerned. I know she's very much she's doing Lent on, the speed run, because she just basically doesn't get on or use social media anymore, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. And, so her life is opened up immensely, with so much other activities that she can be, and wants to be doing, instead of mindlessly scrolling, the endless feed on
Yeah.
whatever social media platform. Um, was I starting to say an answer before you interjected and then suggested someone? I may have been. Just trying to think. Who would
As
be
a
a cool
celebrity
person?
or a movie star?
I may have to have more drinky drink and then I'll
Oh,
come
shoot.
back and think to an answer. Who knows?
I ruined it.
It's fine. It's pub night. It's patron pub night. No rules. Well,
We
some
can get a
rules.
little
Some rules
sloppy.
apply. I mean, my thinking going into this episode is that I'm gonna just leave it raw audio and not hardly do any editing on this unless there's some painfully obvious awkward part where we can't think of anything to move forward. So in the interest of time, so I'm not just sitting here racking my brain. I'm sure if I come up with something cool, I'll interject in and say who's a non-hobby person that I would love to interview. But until then, the mystery will continue.
Hmm. Let me see if I can come up with any more questions that I'm curious to ask you
Yeah.
about the show. Do you think that, looking at your video, you have a really cool podcasting mic and a little pop filter?
Mm-hmm.
It's super nice.
Thank
Do you
you,
think
Dad. That was a Christmas present.
Oh, do you think that? I guess I was gonna ask, do you think that helps? What do you do to get in the zone? When you're gonna, Kurt's about to go sit down and record.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I imagine you're 1 minute you're running around the house taking care of the baby, and the next minute you sit down and you hit record. So what's the warm up process? Are you doing little vocal exercises, or do you need 5 minutes of silence to get into headspace for creativity?
No, I mean, I do have my loving family, my responsibilities there, and so I help with that. And then most of the time, because it's me scrambling to make sure everything's ready to go, and then making sure I have all my notes pulled up, because I've found myself stumbling at those times that I'm I've done 100 episodes, I know how this goes, and then you're just as human and mess up, and then you're like, oh, this doesn't sound professional in the slightest, and I'm a serious podcaster, I know what I'm doing, I'm not some amateur fly by night operation. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah. So if I got a couple minutes before we start recording, I'm pretty fairly regularly listening back to episodes. Sometimes if I'm just driving and there's not any of the podcasts that I'm listening to right now that are striking my inspiration, or I'm, going back and actually having an opportunity and forcing myself to sit down and do show notes or write-ups and all that stuff, and so I'm having to re-listen to older episodes, and then I'm remembering things, and then that's a new inspiration. But also, I'm just trying to consume media, well, maybe not consume media, but I'm trying to enjoy things, I'm trying to live life, and I'm trying to watch cool shows, and maybe various streams of different things, or I'm listening to music, or different YouTube videos, lore videos on Fallout stuff or something that'll just inspire me. Or No Dumb Questions or something like that, and they're talking about some sort of random topic of a thing, and then that in turn will be, that'll all be fertilizer, that'll all be fuel for my inspiration. So then, and then it's just total improv mode. I've got the script, and I've got the bumpers in the bowling lane to help keep me on track, so I don't land in the gutter. But otherwise, well, if a guest is wanting to roll dice and go things randomly, then I'm in full improv. All right, we're gonna yes and this, and we're gonna roll with it, and that ends up being a feedback loop that just gets me more inspired and excited as the episode goes on.
Have you ever done any improv or theater training?
I mean, listeners of our old podcast know, back on one of our early ones when we talked about musicals we did, like, yeah, I mean, I did musicals in high school and college. So that certainly helped me with that level of comfortability. I think even I remember talking about I don't know if it was an actual production, like if it was one of the actual, like, okay, this is like we're live and like we have a live audience in front of us, or if it was a technical rehearsal for Oklahoma, which I'm pretty sure we did our junior year of high school. That was our junior year, right?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think at that rehearsal, because obviously you're having to run lines, and one of the things you get taught early on is like, hey, it's a really good idea to just memorize everybody's lines. So then that way you know what is supposed to happen. And so if something goes off the rails, then you can, be inspired in that moment to say something to trigger the person to remember the sequence to then keep going. So I remember, I'm playing the character Ali Hakim, and I have to go into Judd's shed, and I'm showing him the little wonder kaleidoscope, and he's supposed to say something, and he doesn't say it. And so then I kind of had to weave in what his line was, so then that would trigger, the next sequence of dialogue that was supposed to continue on with the scene. So like that's a moment that I remember being like, that that improvisational sort of nature coming to play to help out. Just being in choir and all that stuff has helped me out as well. And getting to play D&D. I mean, obviously, like any, it still is a hobby, but there are also skills that you're learning and taking away from it as well. And so the more opportunities that I've had to play games with people, whether they are around the table or maybe online or whatnot, all helps to fuel that improvisational nature and being spontaneous in those regards, or being able to adapt and roll with the punches and stuff.
Yeah, I know you're a really big fan of Whose Line also.
Yeah, that was a staple of my household growing up when those would show on, what was it, Fox or whatever. I remember summers. And so we're sitting down on the floor in front of the TV having our dinner because we wanted to watch Whose Line Is It Anyway and laugh while we're eating dinner, and we're dripping wet, sitting on towels and trying to get off the chlorine from the neighborhood pool and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I thought it was cool that you mentioned improv and yes-anding, because that's Divya did improv classes at like a theater, like an improv theater here in town. And so she did like 5 levels of classes, and I think each level is like 6 weeks, something like that. So it's like a year or 2 years of don't check my math, but it was like a year or so of like improv classes, and she would tell me some of the things. And yes and is one of the few industry terms that I remember, but that's cool. Maybe
I do think she would enjoy D&D, especially if I don't know if she would ever want to do like start a podcast or do an actual play on Twitch or something like that. But you definitely exercise those muscles pretty quick when you're having to perform for an audience, or more correct to say is you're just in a game with other people and you're being characters, and so you have to accept the reality of like,
yeah,
oh, I'm Duncan, so I'm not me, I'm Duncan, and Duncan is reacting to what's going on. Okay, well let's see what Duncan does.
The fearlessly brave. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, who now himself is a patron of the arts. So yeah, the next time he gets to come up, he gets to have something extra written on his little business cards that he gets to hand out.
Oh, nice. I think it's been fun to hear your new podcast NPCs as they come up too. Like if there's a need for somebody else, it's been fun to see who gets invented to fill those roles.
Yeah, with Elise's episode that just came out at the time of this recording, just this previous Wednesday. We're up to, we have Duncan, we have Sonia, we have Korak, and we've got Chrisley, and we've got Orion, and now we have Agape, who's a tiefling wild magic sorcerer that's like Feywild inspired wild magic. So Yeah, so we've got like before long. I mean, I'm sure another 100 episodes from now we'll be like, okay, we've got da 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 da, and I'm like rattling off all these different characters, and I'm sure someone out there will be like, well, now all these characters have to be like some sort of
Use a random table for that when you get there.
yeah. Okay, you're going to roll against. Okay, all right. We'll roll a d20 and see which podcast NPC you go with today. No, I was gonna say someone out there being like, we need an actual play and people being these characters, and that would be like, oh, that would be too crazy or overpowered or something. But now I just was thinking of Matt Colville. It's like, oh, well, at that point, you're just like writing a novel or something like that. The novelization of the sidekicks and side quests meta narrative of the podcast, just being like, here are all these disparate podcast characters that are now having to come together and fight some sort of big bad or whatever in the world, and now I'm a writer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which could be done, I suppose, but I don't know who would even read that.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool.
No, I mean, I was happy when Andrew Strother from Roll for Persuasion took his NPC that we made, and then when he was invited to play on a Jasper's Game Day charity stream, he took Quando and converted Quando from an NPC into an actual player character that he used in the charity one-shot. And of course, Brennan Lee Mulligan is the dungeon master for that one shot. So he's a pretty big deal now in D&D hobby space. He would be a fun person to have on the podcast for sure. Might have to work some angles on that. Get some connections involved, being like, please, oh please, will you be on my silly little podcast if you're not too busy? Yeah, he would be a delight to have. I'm sure he's very, very knowledgeable, and of course, speaking of Critical Role, he did one of the mini campaigns, tale. What is it? Exandria Tales, EXU Exandria Unlimited. I think is so. If they bring on a guest dungeon master to kind of host like a small number of episodes, and it has other characters. And so Brennan Lee Mulligan ran an EXU show called Calamity, which was basically going back in time within Critical Role's history and kind of explaining, okay, here was the Age of Arcanum, like the age of like super duper high fantasy, and then the world breaks and falls apart, and then that's what gets us now into our current baseline of like, okay, the great empires have now fallen and died, and all the magic items are scattered in the dungeons all throughout the world and that kind of stuff. So yeah, Brennan Lee Mulligan got to be the dungeon master for that run. So yeah, like I said, loads of cool people in the hobby space, and I'll try my best to ask any and all of them to step into the Levitating Platter, but we will see who accepts the invitation or not.
Mm-hmm. There's always room.
There's always room. There's always tables here because, oh man, that was just a fun bit of lore, which I think I explained early on in the introduction episode of the idea of the Levitating Platter basically just being a magnificent mansion spell. Because I think I was at the real life Flying Saucer talking to Michael and Elizabeth Horsley and just being like, well, how can it be like a magic tavern and stuff like that? And then I was reading the spell Magnificent Mansion. I was like, oh, but you can actually change things around how you want. And you have invisible servants in the mansion. And so that's why there's levitating platters, because they're invisible servants that are just going around carrying them. And so I was like, oh, he just has permanently affixed portal doors. So there is like a physical building in Alchester, in the fictional town where this tavern exists, but whenever someone steps through the door, what they're actually doing is stepping inside of an extra dimensional space, and that's how Randolph is able to like shift the inside. So if someone needs like a party room, he can just kind of think about it for a second, and then like, okay, now suddenly like another party room has suddenly found its way in the dimensions of the building, or like, oh hey, more people are coming to stay, okay, I guess I'm going to need to make like a few more rooms, And then, and then he's got Mr. Underhill to kind of help him manage and keep track of like who's in there and who's not and stuff like that. So, which all that helped to inspire in the campaign that I was running for work, with the idea that, on this giant ship, the Cadence, and you have like the quarters, the ritzy section in the back of the ship. Well, if you have just like a room in this section, obviously you can't have like a mansion, but if you have permanently affixed magnificent mansion doors that you've cast for like over a year, you get a hedge wizard to just sit there and cast it for a year. Eventually you could just have like, you would enter in a room on a ship, and then it would just be like one room would have nothing but like doors all lined on the walls, and then based on whichever door you enter is like, it's basically like a miniature mansion on the inside. So that's how the rich and powerful on this city state that's the ship are able to just have all this space with it not actually taking up that much room. Fun fact, fun world building stuff, which you can definitely take for your game if you want. That's my idea. I say you can cast Magnificent Mansion for a year in the same spot, and that'll eventually make a permanent doorway. I think that's cool. It's not written down, but I think it should be. I think that should be an effect. Because like if you do a teleportation circle spell in the same spot for an entire year, that's how you make permanently affixed teleportation circles. So the same logic should apply for like Magnificent Mansion or whatever else.
Yeah, seems fair. Yeah.
DM hot takes.
That's the roll here. Is there anything else you wanted to cover? We just hit an hour.
Yeah.
That's
you still have more drink to drink, or are you tired of me?
I have a little bit more drink, but I also need to do my duty to my household and take the dog out. So,
okay.
Yes.
Well, it's nice just having a mini blank tape kind of reunion. We didn't have any news tidbits to share, not really. And I guess the topic of discussion was just my podcast that I'm doing. I don't know. Like, do you think that trying to explore a higher tier is something worth doing for like $10 a month? I know, again, behind the scenes, letting the third chair, letting the audience know. I mean, I think some ideas that maybe you and Katie and me were discussing, do you think it's feasible to do like some sort of like quarterly? Because I think I talked to my wife about it, and she said like, oh, that would be fun. Like if you had some of your previous guests come back and you did like one shots or something like that every quarter, whether they use those particular characters or I don't know, maybe they make up other characters, but they're encountering NPCs that have been made on the show, and then that's specifically like one shot actual play bonus content or something that gets produced. Like, do you think that's worth it? Like, if you did $10 a month, like, is something like that feasible, or is that
like
I would have to ask for more?
If you gave 10 a month, then every quarter you would participate in that show, is what you're saying?
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, like if you do the $10 a month and you could participate in it, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I would do it.
Okay, so it'd be like a dedicated way to play D&D for sure.
A low risk quarterly commitment to do little one shots. Yeah, that would be cool for me. That fits my interest. Like I don't really have a lot of like local friends in town who are into it. And I don't have the time to like really bring on like a whole big extra like every weekly hobby kind of thing. But I like it enough to want to do it every now and then. That would be kind of cool for me. That's just me though. I'm just one of your patrons.
Sure. Okay. So okay.
Yeah, for me the big thing with the Patreon is like, again, for me as a software developer guy, like software tools are important, and if there's a tool that you want that can make your life easier and help you do your little job, I say little, but I mean like your job, that's like a really creative, passion for you. Like it would be, let's find a way to get you that tool so your life becomes easier. But so that's my thing. Is like I like, my job is writing software for a living, and then like I think it's important for good software to be like rewarded by being paid for it, and so I like to use tools. I like to pay for tools that are good. So if there's a tool you want, like let's find a Patreon tier that'll get you to be able to use that. And then if that means I get to play a D&D game every now and then, that sounds great too.
So $10 a month. Okay, so I'm just thinking because now I feel like if I'm having to commit with making PDFs, like because I know I talked to our previous guest and my friend, my coworker, um, Catherine, and I was like, what would something like that actually cost, like in time and effort, as far as like getting custom art and
Yeah.
designing like a template and then having everything all put together? Like, it'd be one thing if I was like my previous guest, Lauren Walsh, who actually does this with her Patreon. So if you are looking for like legitimate, like, I want full-fledged PDFs of like NPC artwork and maybe little VTT tokens if I'm using a virtual tabletop, and I want like custom little art
Oh,
token
cool.
pieces that I can
Yeah.
use in like Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or whatever platform I'm using. Like I know Lauren Walsh does that already. Fantastic job. And she's a legitimate, like, award-winning recognized artist. Not that I have the gall to compete. Well, I just don't have the artistic talent in and of myself. And trying to ask my friends, like trying to ask Catherine or anyone else to be like, hey, you should do this art for me. But then what does that cost as far as like time and effort, and like how consistently could we do it? So you're of the opinion, maybe perhaps like if I did $10 and then was like, all right, from now on, $10 a month, if you do this, then for sure on the books we will start a like a just for us D&D campaign or something like that, like a quarterly campaign. Maybe it's a series of one shots and we try a bunch of different games, or like it is like a dedicated like D&D campaign that just gets to play like every once in a while.
That sounds cool to me. Yeah.
As far as like the reoccurring campaign, or just a series of one shots and exploring
Oh,
other
let's see.
different games.
I feel like one shots, maybe because there's such a variety of characters,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know which is more effort. Like on one hand, if they're all related, then you get to like reuse your work of like making those characters. You know what I mean? But if they're
Mm-hmm.
all individual one shots, then you have to make sure you have full fledged characters for every single one, and maybe that's more work. I don't know. Um, I guess it would come down to whatever you think is more doable for you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't have a strong preference there.
Sure. That would be definitely something to talk to the family about and be like, hey, is this something that I can reasonably do, like once a quarter, to be like, hey, we're going to get together the online game for all the patrons of the $10 or more club that want to participate in that. And then have them, we'll just do a game. Maybe we'll be like, okay. And then is that something that is just private and it's just fun and just for us because that's like the perk of being the $10, or is it I'm making content and I need the general public to know the cool stuff that we're making? Like, does the group want to be able to like go back and listen to it if I go through the effort of recording it or something like that? Or is it just like, hey, for $10 a month at this level, which, so for a quarter, it's basically like $30 that you're paying me. And then you would get to play in what, like, a one shot? Like, is that worth your $30 a quarter? Basically is what I'm trying to think of. Like what is, yeah, I mean, these may be more questions that have to be pondered off the air. Um, but it is food for thought. And maybe those of you who are listening and enjoying this patrons pub night, like I clearly am at this point, um, maybe you can let me know your thoughts and opinions.
Yeah, there's no
Certainly want to
pressure.
get Goblin Katie's opinion. So
Yeah, for sure. You can always try different things and see how it goes. So no pressure to solve it all at once. I'm just throwing out feedback.
yeah,
So
that'd be cool. Yeah, $10 a month for some kind of a game, quarterly, or yeah, or something monthly. I don't know. Monthly could be pushing it.
monthly's too much. Yeah, for me.
Yeah,
But
quarterly is a little more. Yeah, because that way you can at least schedule it out for a little bit better. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So
and
there's
again,
something there.
I'm just excited by the idea that I get to support you and help make sure that the show is financially stable and not a huge burden to you. So
Yeah.
that's a
I'm
big part
breaking
of it.
even basically. I mean, I'm getting a little bit of more above, but basically I'm breaking even. So if we want to do even more cool stuff, we got to get definitely got to get the patrons out there. Do you think it helps to do these patron pub nights more often? And because I think we were toying with the idea of like, oh, we do like this whole long recording, but then I do two versions where it's like one gets uploaded to the Patreon and it's full, and then like another one gets publicly released, but it's cut short, or like only the relevant stuff is talked about. Then it's like, oh, if you wanted to listen to more stuff, I guess you'll just have to join the Patreon. I know Andrew's Roll for Persuasion podcast does they when it was he used to do he probably still does, but the Zone of Truth segment in which like, okay, the regular interview is done and now here's like an extra 20 minutes of where we talk about like some specific topic that the guest was passionate about. I don't know if I need to adopt some sort of model because my podcast episodes at this point now vary somewhere between an average of like 40 minutes to an hour. I know the goal going in was 30 minutes, but that was probably with more chop, slice, and dice and all that stuff. And I want to make sure my guests can talk and don't feel too robotic. So letting them be more natural, okay, it just means that episodes are now like 40 minutes to an hour. So I don't know. Could you handle? Do you think it's more? I feel like it may be too much if I promise like, oh, for $10 a month you can get like extra bonus content stuff, like more of the in between week episodes or something like that. How I used to do those more often.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me personally, as a patron, like I think the extra things, whether that's like a pub night or a game that happens, like I think like 4 per year is good. Like so like a pub night a couple times a year, a game every quarter. Like that seems good for me.
Okay.
I don't know. I think you'll just have to try things and see how it goes.
Okay.
It's hard to imagine like what's going to work or what's going to get the most traction um,
Yeah,
what,
because it's like I know at this point the podcast now officially has 7,800 downloads. So I mean that's pretty good for just now getting into our fourth technical season. So it is a niche topic, so it's not like one of these other very great shows that may have star power attached to it or something like that, or they're just, I don't know, they're genuinely more interesting than me or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, no, these are all good questions, and I'm glad that I had some a sounding board, and we could have this metaphorical, like, oh, it's like we're back at the Levitating Platter, we're at the Flying Saucer, and we're grabbing a beer, in our case, whiskeys, and we're just sitting down and being like, what is life, man?
What is this Patreon stuff, man?
What's this Patreon stuff?
What is podcasting?
Yeah. There's two white guys podcasting. The world needs more of those, am I right?
Well, we were close. We were going to have a third person, but I think we have like a minute and a half left before it kicks us out. So.
Oh, no. See, no, my Zencastr's telling me I've still got 41 minutes left. So,
oh, nice.
If you want to get sloshed, we've got the time to do so, but I would not encourage it.
No, I appreciate it. I think I got to bounce.
Okay.
So.
Well, I guess this concludes our first historic Patrons Pub Night episode, and I think I'll probably just leave this audio as is. I might try and get fancy and add one of those underlying music things. I don't know. Might give it some nice ambiance or something underneath, or maybe just trying to find like royalty-free background noise that I could conceivably use. I may have to do some searching for that. But anyway, yeah. I don't know how to sign off on this particular episode.
Well, thanks for having me on, and it's fun to be on a little podcast again and spend some night chatting with you. And cheers to 100 episodes. Congrats. That's an accomplishment that deserves to be celebrated. So thanks for having me be a part of it. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.